The jungle seemed different after the razor wing attack. Word spread through the ecosystem in ways that science could not explain. Creatures that normally hunted during the day retreated deep into their dens and caves. Plants that had simply grown in the path before now twisted their thorny branches to block the way. The very air felt heavier, like a storm was coming, but the sky remained clear. Jinwoo walked differently now, too. His steps were more sure and quiet, like he was learning to read the jungle floor. The alien hunters noticed this change with growing unease. The human who had stumbled over every root and vine yesterday now moved through the undergrowth like he belonged there. His eyes constantly scanned the trees and shadows, searching for threats or prey. The Shadow Maw trail was easy to follow once they knew what to look for. Massive claw marks scored the bark of ancient trees, deep gouges that went through the wood like it was soft clay. The creature had marked its territory, with deliberate care showing any challenger exactly what kind of power they would face. Bones littered the forest floor white and clean, picked by scavengers. Slesh knelt beside a particularly large tree studying the claw marks with professional interest. The gouges were fresh, maybe 2 days old, and they went higher up the trunk than even he could reach. The Vorthak warrior was 8 feet tall, but the highest marks were another 3 feet above his head. Whatever made them was massive beyond imagination. Zik the Chitrak soldier found more evidence near a small stream. Massive footprints in the mud showed the size and weight of their quarry. Each print was as long as Jinwoo's entire body and sunk deep into the earth. The spacing between prints showed the creature's stride was longer than most beings were tall. It moved through the jungle like a living earthquake. Thok discovered the most disturbing evidence of all. A clearing where the Shadow Maw had made a kill. The Gorath champion examined the scene with the eye of an experienced tracker. Something large had died here recently, but there were no bones or blood left behind. Only smooth patches of earth where the struggle had taken place, and a few scraps of metallic hide. The alien hunters recognized the hide immediately. It belonged to an adult steel tusk, one of the armored herbivores that roamed the jungle in small herds. These creatures were the size of elephants with natural armor plating that could turn aside energy. Weapons. Their tusks were made of a metal alloy harder than most spaceship hulls. They were considered nearly impossible to kill. Yet something had killed this one and apparently eaten it completely. Bones, hide, tusks. Everything was gone. The only sign of the struggle was disturbed earth and those few scraps of armor that even the Shadow Maw could not digest. The implications were terrifying. If the beast could kill and consume a steel tusk, then no creature on the planet was safe as they followed the trail deeper into the jungle. The signs of the Shadow Maw's presence became more obvious. Trees were knocked down or split in half. Boulders were cracked and scattered. Entire sections of undergrowth were flattened as if something enormous had passed through without caring about obstacles. The path of destruction led toward the heart of the jungle, where the oldest and most dangerous creatures lived. Jinwoo seemed drawn to these signs of violence in a way that disturbed the alien hunters. He would stop and examine claw marks with intense focus, running his fingers along the deep gouges. His breathing would become shallow, and his eyes would take on that strange inner fire they had seen during the razor wing fight. It was as if he was learning something from the Shadow Maw's trail. The jungle canopy grew thicker as they traveled, blocking out more and more sunlight. The air became humid and thick with the smell of decay and old blood. Strange calls echoed from the darkness above, while unseen creatures rustled through the undergrowth. The alien hunters activated their motion sensors and thermal imaging, but the jungle was full of so much life that the readings were useless. They found more kill sites as they went deeper. Each one told the same story. Something massive had attacked and killed creatures that should have been able to defend themselves. A pack of razor wings torn apart and scattered, a family of rock hides crushed to pulp, despite their stone-like skin. Even a young Shadow Maw smaller than the one they hunted had been killed and partially eaten. The frequency of kill sites increased as they approached the heart of the jungle. The Shadow Maw was not just a predator, it was a force of nature that killed, for pleasure as much as food. The alien hunters had faced dangerous creatures before, but nothing that left such a trail of destruction. They began to wonder if their weapons would be enough. As evening approached, they reached a vast canyon that cut through the jungle like a wound in the earth. The walls were covered with ancient carvings left by some long-dead civilization, but the symbols were worn smooth by countless years of rain and wind. At the bottom of the canyon lay something that made even the bravest warriors pause. Bones filled the canyon floor like a carpet of death, thousands upon thousands of skeletons from every species that lived in the jungle. They were piled in drifts against the canyon walls, bleached white by sun and rain. The sheer number was overwhelming evidence of centuries of killing by something that ruled this place absolutely. In the center of the bone field stood a massive cave entrance carved into the canyon wall. The opening was perfectly round and smooth as if melted by incredible heat. Strange symbols were carved around the entrance, but they were different from the worn carvings on the canyon walls. These were fresh and deep, cut into the stone with claws rather than tools. A sound echoed. From deep within the cave, a low rumbling that seemed to come from the very center of the earth. It was not quite a growl and not quite a roar, but something in between that made the bones on the canyon floor rattle and shake. The alien hunters felt the sound in their bones, and several of them took involuntary steps backward. But Jinwoo stepped forward. His face was calm and his eyes were bright with anticipation rather than fear. He looked down at the field of bones, and then up at the cave entrance like he was seeing an old friend. The plasma cutter on his belt hummed softly as if responding to his excitement. The other hunters watched him with growing alarm. The rumbling from the cave grew louder and deeper, shaking dust from the canyon walls. Then something moved in the darkness of the entrance, something so large that it blocked out what little light penetrated into the cave. The Shadow Maw was coming, and it had sensed their presence. The greatest predator on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy was about to show itself. Raised his plasma rifle and activated his targeting system. Zik drew his energy blades and spread his forearms wide for maximum striking power. Thok gripped his warhammer and planted his feet firmly on the rocky ground. All of them were ready to fight for their lives against the legendary beast that had killed everything that entered its domain. But Jinwoo did something that shocked them all. He reached down and placed his plasma cutter on the ground. Then he straightened up and raised his empty hands. The alien hunters thought he was surrendering, preparing to become another meal for the monster. But the expression on his face was not one of defeat. It was anticipation. The rumbling stopped. The canyon fell silent except for the whisper of wind through the bones. The darkness in the cave entrance seemed to deepen, as if something was studying them from within. Then slowly, carefully, something began to emerge from the depths, a shape so large and terrible that the very air seemed to thicken around it. The Shadow Maw had arrived and the real hunt was about to begin. The Shadow Maw emerged from its cave like a nightmare-given form. It was larger than anything the alien hunters had imagined, 20 feet from nose to tail with muscles that bulged like steel cables under midnight black fur. Its head was the size of a small vehicle with jaws that could swallow a grown Vorthak warrior. Whole teeth like curved swords gleamed white in the dim canyon light. Its eyes were the worst part. Twin orbs of burning red that seemed to hold the accumulated malice of centuries. They swept across the group of hunters with intelligent hatred, taking measure of each threat. The beast had ruled this jungle for 200 years and had never met anything it could not kill. Its confidence radiated from every line of its massive body. The creature moved with impossible grace for something so large. Each step was perfectly placed and silent, despite its enormous weight. Its claws were longer than Jinwoo's entire arm and sharp enough to cut through spaceship armor. The alien hunters had seen the evidence of those claws work carved into trees and stone throughout the jungle. Slesh fired first his plasma rifle, sending bolts of superheated energy toward the beast's chest. The shots that could punch through battle armor struck the Shadow Maw and simply disappeared into its thick hide. The creature did not even flinch. It looked at the Vorthak warrior with something that might have been amusement, then dismissed him as beneath notice. Zik attacked next, moving faster, then thought his 4 energy blades weaving patterns of death in the air around him. He was the finest warrior of his species, trained from birth to kill. But when his blades struck the Shadow Maw's hide, they skittered across the surface like toys. The beast backhanded him almost casually, sending the Chitrak soldier flying into the canyon wall. Thok charged with his massive warhammer raised high above his head. The weapon that could shatter boulders came down with all the force the Gorath champion could muster. It struck the Shadow Maw square on the skull with a sound like thunder. The beast staggered for just a moment, then shook its head and roared with annoyance rather than pain. The roar was unlike anything any of them had ever heard. It started deep in the creature's chest and built to a crescendo that shook the very foundations of the canyon. Bones rattled and danced on the ground while small rocks fell from the canyon walls. The sound went beyond hearing into feeling, hitting the hunters like a physical blow. But through it all, Jinwoo stood perfectly still, watching the beast with calm eyes. When the roar ended and the echoes faded, he took a step forward. The Shadow Maw noticed him for the first time, and something strange passed between them, a moment of recognition that seemed to puzzle the ancient predator. The beast lowered its massive head to study this small creature more closely, its burning eyes fixed on Jinwoo with an intensity that should have turned him to ash with fear. But instead of cowering or running, the human smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the expression of something that had found exactly what it was looking for. Then Jinwoo moved, and everything the alien hunters thought they knew about physics and biology shattered like glass. The Shadow Maw lunged forward with the speed of a striking snake, its jaws opening wide enough to swallow him whole. But Jinwoo was no longer where the beast expected him to be. He slid under the massive paw that tried to pin him to the ground and came up inside the creature's guard. His right fist drove upward into the Shadow Maw's chest with a sound like a cannon shot. The impact cracked ribs that were thicker than tree trunks and sent shock waves through the beast's entire body. The Shadow Maw roared again, but this time there was pain mixed with the rage. Nothing so small had ever heard it before. The creature tried to understand what had just happened while Jinwoo rolled away from it, snapping jaws. Every movement the human made was perfectly timed and placed as if he could see the future. Millions of years of human evolution exploded to the surface of Jinwoo's mind. His ancestors had hunted mammoths with nothing but stone spears and determination. They had faced saber-toothed tigers and cave bears when humanity was still learning to use fire. All of that genetic memory that had been buried under layers of civilization suddenly blazed to life. The Shadow Maw swiped with claws that could cut through starship hulls, but Jinwoo caught the massive paw in both hands. His feet dug furrows in the solid stone as he braced against the creature's strength. For a moment that seemed to last forever, human and beast were locked in a contest of pure power. The alien hunters watched in terror as something impossible unfolded before their eyes. The human was holding back the Shadow Maw through nothing but raw physical strength. His muscles stood out like steel cables and veins bulged on his neck, like rope. His back bowed with the effort, but he was not giving ground. Then slowly, incredibly, Jinwoo began to push back. The Shadow Maw's eyes widened with something it had never felt before. Uncertainty. This tiny creature was forcing its mighty paw aside through nothing but will and strength. The beast that had never known defeat was beginning to understand that it might have met its match. Jinwoo released the paw suddenly, and the Shadow Maw stumbled backward from its own momentum. Before it could recover, he leaped onto its back, his hands finding purchase in the thick black fur. The beast thrashed like a thing possessed, trying to dislodge him, but the human held on with inhuman determination. The Shadow Maw slammed itself against the canyon walls, trying to crush the small figure clinging to its back. Stone cracked and crumbled under the impact, but Jinwoo flowed like water around the crushing blows. Always one step ahead of destruction, he climbed toward the creatures, head dodging, snapping jaws and whipping spines. The alien hunters had stopped fighting. They could only watch in horrified fascination as the impossible battle continued. The human moved like he was born for this kind of combat. Every grab and hold was perfectly placed, every dodge timed to the split second. He was not just fighting the Shadow Maw, he was dominating it. The beast bucked and rolled, trying every trick it had learned in 2 centuries of killing, but nothing worked. The human clung to its back like a parasite that could not be shaken loose. His hands found nerve clusters and pressure points that sent waves of pain through the creature's massive body. Jinwoo reached the Shadow Maw's neck and wrapped his arms around it in a grip that could not be broken. The beast tried to throw him off, but his hold was like steel bands that only tightened with every struggle. The Shadow Maw's roars became desperate wheezes as it began to understand what was happening. For the first time in its long and bloody life, the apex predator of Corvin Prime was being hunted. The roles had reversed, and it was no longer the predator but the prey. The human on its back was not just trying to kill it. He was dismantling it piece by piece with nothing but raw determination and ancestral fury. The battle raged on, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The greatest predator in the galaxy had met something more dangerous than itself. Something that carried the concentrated violence of an entire species, evolution. Something that would not stop until its enemy was completely destroyed. The Shadow Maw began to tire its movements, becoming slower and more desperate, but Jinwoo showed no signs of fatigue. If anything, he seemed to be growing stronger as the fight continued, as if the violence was feeding some primal need deep in his human soul. The end was coming, and everyone in the canyon could feel it. The first light of dawn crept through the jungle canopy like pale fingers reaching through green darkness. Jinwoo had not slept all night, listening to the sounds of creatures hunting and dying in the forest around their camp. The alien warriors were already awake, checking their weapons and preparing for another day of tracking the legendary Shadow Maw. They moved with the confidence of beings who had never known real fear. Slesh, the Vorthak leader, was cleaning his plasma rifle when the first scream split the morning air. It came from above, high in the trees, where something large was moving through the branches. The sound was like metal being torn apart, mixed with the cry of an angry bird. All the hunters looked up at once there, weapons rising to track the source of the noise. Then they came down like living missiles, a pack of razor wings, the flying death dealers of Corvin Prime. Their bodies were the size of large dogs, but covered in metallic feathers that gleamed like knives in the morning light. Their wingspan was twice their body length, and every feather was sharp enough to cut through armor. Their beaks were curved like scythes, and their talons could punch through steel. There were 6 of them diving from the canopy with their wings folded back for maximum speed. Their metallic feathers caught the light as they fell, creating a deadly rainbow of reflected sunbeams. The sound they made was like a squadron of fighter jets screaming toward their target. The alien hunters had fought these creatures before and knew how dangerous they could be. Slesh raised his plasma rifle and fired 3 quick shots. The energy bolts lit up the jungle with blue-white light. 2 of the razor wings exploded in mid-air, their metallic feathers scattering like deadly confetti. But the other 4 kept coming, their eyes locked on different targets around the camp. The battle was about to begin. A Chitrik soldier named Zik moved faster than the eye could follow. His forearms became a blur as he drew 2 energy blades from his harness. The curved weapons hummed with power as he spun them in deadly arcs. A razor-wing dove straight at his head, but he ducked and slashed upward. The energy blades cut through the creature like it was made of paper. The 2 halves fell on either side of him, still twitching. The Gorath champion Thok caught another razor wing in his massive stone hands. Just as it reached him, the creature tried to rake his face with its talons, but they could not penetrate his rock-hard skin. He squeezed slowly, and the razor wing let out a shriek of pain and terror. Then his hands came together with a sound like breaking bones, and the creature went silent. But 2 razor wings were still alive, and they had spotted the weakest target in the group. Jinwoo Park, the human mining engineer, was crouched behind a fallen log with only his plasma cutter for protection. The creatures seemed to sense his fear like sharks smelling blood in the water. They changed direction in mid-flight and dove straight toward him. Time seemed to slow down as Jinwoo watched death approaching him. The first razor wing was only seconds away. Its metallic feathers spread wide, its beak open to show rows of needle-sharp teeth. Its eyes were like black marbles filled with killing instinct. This was a creature born to hunt and kill, and right now, he was its prey. Something strange happened inside Jinwoo's mind as he watched the razor wing diving toward him. Instead of freezing with terror or trying to run away, he felt something else rising up from deep inside his body. It was like a fire starting in his chest and spreading outward through his arms and legs. His vision became sharper and clearer. The sounds of the jungle grew louder. His muscles felt stronger than they had ever felt before. The razor wing was almost on him when Jinwoo moved. He did not run backward or try to dodge to the side. Instead, he stepped forward into the attack. His left hand shot out and grabbed the creature's neck just behind its head. His right hand brought the plasma cutter up in a smooth arc that ended with the cutting beam slicing deep into the razor wing's throat. The tool that was designed to cut through solid asteroid rock burned through flesh and bone like they were made of butter. The razor wing died instantly, its metallic feathers going dark as its life ended. But Jinwoo was not finished. The second creature was right behind the first, diving toward his back, with its talons extended. Without looking behind him, Jinwoo spun around and backhanded the second razor wing with his left fist. The impact sounded like a gunshot echoing through the jungle. The creature's neck snapped with a sharp crack, and it fell to the ground like a broken toy. Its body twitched once and then went still. The jungle fell silent. The alien hunters stood frozen, staring at the human who had just killed two of the most dangerous predators on the planet, with nothing but a mining tool in his bare hands. The remaining razor wings that had been circling overhead let out cries of fear and flew away, something they had never done before in the presence of prey. Jinwoo stood over the bodies of the dead creatures, breathing heavily. His work clothes were torn and bloody. His black hair was wild and his dark eyes seemed to glow with an inner fire. The plasma cutter in his hand was still humming with power, ready to cut through anything that threatened him. He looked like a completely different person from the scared engineer who had crawled out of the crashed ship. Slesh approached slowly, his plasma rifle lowered but ready. The Vorthak warrior had fought on 100 worlds against creatures that most beings could not even imagine. But something about the human made his scales crawl with an emotion he had not felt in years. Fear. The way Jinwoo had moved, the speed and precision of his attacks, the complete lack of hesitation. It was not human. The other alien hunters were equally shaken. Zik, the Chitrak soldier, clicked his mandibles nervously. His compound eyes had recorded every detail of the fight, and his warrior brain was trying to process what he had seen. No creature that small should be able to generate that much force. The sound of the razor wing's neck breaking had been like a tree branch snapping. Thok the Gorath champion rumbled deep in his throat, a sound that might have been approval or concern. His people respected strength above all else, and what he had just witnessed was strength of a kind he had never seen before. The human had not used superior weapons or advanced technology. He had used nothing but his body and his will to kill. Jinwoo looked around at the alien faces staring at him. And slowly the fire in his eyes began to fade. He seemed confused by their expressions, as if he did not understand what had just happened. His breathing gradually returned to normal, and his grip on the plasma cutter relaxed. But the alien hunters continued to watch him with new respect and growing uneasiness. The jungle around them was still quiet, as if every creature for miles around had felt what happened and decided to stay hidden. The morning sun climbed higher, painting the green canopy with golden light. But something fundamental had changed in the dynamics of their group. The human was no longer the weakest member of their hunting party. Slesh finally spoke, his voice rough with uncertainty. The human had surprised them all, but the day was still young and the Shadow Maw was still out there waiting. They needed to continue the hunt. But now they would be watching Jinwoo Park very carefully, wondering what other surprises the supposedly weak human might have hidden inside him as they prepared to move deeper into the jungle. Jinwoo cleaned the blood from his hands and checked his plasma cutter. The tool had worked perfectly, cutting through the razor wing's throat, like it was designed to do. He did not seem to understand why the aliens were looking at him so strangely. All he knew was that something had tried to kill him and he had stopped it. The hunt for the Shadow Maw would continue, but everything had changed. The aliens no longer saw a weak human who would die. In the jungle, they saw something else entirely, something that might be far more dangerous than anything they had ever encountered before. The red sun of Corvin Prime blazed like an angry eye in the purple sky above the deadly jungle planet. Every alien warrior in the galaxy knew this world's name, and most of them feared it. This was where the strongest came to prove themselves against creatures that could tear apart starships with their bare claws. The planet was covered in thick green jungle that stretched from horizon to horizon, filled with things that had too many teeth and not enough mercy. Deep in the jungle clearing stood the greatest hunters from across the stars. The massive Vorthak warriors towered over everyone else, their thick brown scales gleaming like armor in the filtered sunlight. Their yellow eyes swept the tree line, constantly searching for threats. Their claws could slice through metal like soft cheese, and their muscles bulged with the power to crush bones. Their leader, Slesh, was the biggest of them all, with scars covering his hide like a map of old battles. He had killed on 50 worlds and feared nothing. Beside them crouched the insect-like Chitrak soldiers, their forearms moving in constant motion as they checked their energy weapons. Their compound eyes saw everything at once, catching the smallest movement in the shadows. Their reflexes were faster than lightning, and their thin bodies could bend in ways that seemed impossible. They made clicking sounds when they talked to each other, a language that sounded like breaking glass. The stone-skinned Gorath champions stood like living mountains, their gray bodies carved from solid rock. They carried massive warhammers that could crush boulders to dust. Each one was 8 feet tall and weighed as much as a small vehicle. Their leader, Thok, had arms like tree trunks and hands that could bend steel bars into pretzels. When he walked, the ground shook under his feet. All of these warriors had come to hunt the legendary Shadow Maw, the most dangerous creature on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. It was said to be the size of 3 elephants with teeth like curved swords and claws that could cut through spaceship hulls. Its roar could be heard from 10 miles away, and its eyes glowed like red stars in the darkness. For 200 years, it had ruled this jungle, killing everything that dared enter its territory. The alien hunters had been tracking the beast for 3 days, following a trail of massive claw marks and scattered bones. The jungle around them pulsed with hidden life. Strange calls echoed from the canopy above, while unseen creatures rustled through the undergrowth. The very air seemed thick with danger and the smell of old blood. Every step could be their last. But these were the greatest warriors of their species. They lived for moments like this. Then, the sky above them erupted in fire and smoke. A small transport ship came screaming through the atmosphere, trailing flames and sparks. It crashed into the jungle with a sound like thunder, shaking the ground and sending flocks of strange birds into the air. The hunters rushed toward the crash site, their weapons ready, expecting to find enemy soldiers or perhaps valuable salvage. What they found instead made them stop and stare in confusion. From the burning wreckage of the ship crawled a single figure covered in soot and bleeding from small cuts. It was a human male, not very tall, with black hair and dark eyes. He wore simple work clothes that were torn and dirty. A small device hung from his belt that looked like some kind of tool. He coughed and wheezed as he pulled himself away from the flames. The alien hunters had heard of humans, but few had ever seen one in person. They were known throughout the galaxy as the weakest intelligent species, barely able to survive on their own homeworld of Earth. They had no natural weapons, no thick skin, no powerful muscles. They were soft and slow and afraid of almost everything. Most aliens considered them little more than clever pets. Slesh looked down at the human and began to laugh, a sound like grinding metal. The other Vorthak joined in their hissing laughter, filling the air. The human looked up at them with wide, frightened eyes, clearly not understanding what was happening. The Chitrak soldiers clicked their mandibles in amusement, while the Gorath champions rumbled with deep chuckling sounds. The human tried to stand, but his legs were shaky from the crash. He said something in his own language, but none of the aliens understood the words. He pointed at his ship, and then at himself, making gestures that seemed to be asking for help. His voice was high and weak, compared to the deep growls and roars of the alien warriors. Slesh decided this would be entertaining. He gestured for the human to follow them. The other hunters protested at first. Why should they be slowed down by such a pathetic creature? But Slesh explained that it would be funny to watch the human die in the jungle. They could place bets on how long he would survive. Maybe an hour, perhaps 2 if he was very lucky. The human seemed to understand that he was being allowed to come with them. He nodded eagerly and tried to keep up as they began moving deeper into the jungle. His name was Jinwoo Park, though the aliens did not bother to learn it. He was a mining engineer from one of Earth's outer colonies, trained to use plasma cutters to slice through asteroid rock. He had been traveling to a new mining station when his ship suffered engine failure. As they moved through the jungle, Jinwoo struggled to match the pace of the alien hunters. They moved like predators born to this environment while he stumbled over roots and got caught on thorny vines. His breathing was heavy and sweat poured down his face. The aliens found this very amusing and made jokes in their own languages about the weak human. The jungle around them grew darker and more dangerous as they went deeper. Strange sounds echoed from all directions, the calls of creatures that had never been catalogued by Galactic science rustling in the bushes that could be anything from harmless plant eaters to deadly predators. The very trees seemed to watch them with hidden eyes. Night began to fall and the jungle transformed into something from a nightmare. Glowing eyes appeared in the darkness. Things with too many legs scuttled through the undergrowth, the air filled with the sounds of hunting calls and death screams. The alien warriors set up a defensive camp using advanced energy shields and motion sensors. Their weapons hummed with deadly power, ready to kill anything that came too close. Jinwoo sat alone at the edge of the camp, clutching his plasma cutter tool. The aliens had given him no food and no shelter. They expected him to die before morning, and were already making jokes about what would eat him first. He looked up at the alien stars above this deadly world and wondered if he would ever see Earth again. The jungle was full of sounds that made his skin crawl. Something large was moving. Through the trees nearby, he could hear the snap of breaking branches and the thud of massive footsteps. The aliens seemed unconcerned, but Jinwoo felt every hair on his body standing up. His hands shook as he gripped his tool tighter. In the distance, something roared, a sound so deep and powerful that it seemed to shake the very ground. The aliens all turned toward the sound with excitement in their eyes. They knew what that roar meant. The Shadow Maw was close, and soon the real hunt would begin. But first they had to survive the night in a place where death lurked behind every shadow. What happened next would echo through the galaxy for generations to come, spoken of in whispers, by beings who had never set foot on Corvin Prime. The greatest warriors of a dozen species would gather in cantinas and spaceports to tell the story of the day they watched a human tear apart the Shadow Maw with his bare hands. Jinwoo tightened his grip around the massive creature's neck. But this was not a simple stranglehold. This was something far more primal and terrible. His hands, strengthened by adrenaline and millions of years of evolutionary fury, began to do something that defied every law of biology and physics. The aliens knew. The Shadow Maw's hide was tougher than starship armor, able to turn aside energy weapons that could melt through steel. But under Jinwoo's fingers it began to part like soft leather. His grip was not just crushing the life out of the beast. It was literally tearing it apart. The creature's desperate struggles only made the process faster. Slesh watched in absolute horror as the human's fingers sank deeper into the Shadow Maw's neck. Blood began to seep between his knuckles, but Jinwoo showed no sign of stopping. His face was a mask of concentrated fury, his teeth bared in a snarl that belonged to humanity's darkest evolutionary past. The Shadow Maw tried one last desperate gambit. It threw itself backward and rolled, crushing its own body weight against the canyon floor, trying to smash the human into paste. But Jinwoo rode out the impact like he was part of the beast itself. His grip never loosened and his terrible work never stopped. Zik had recovered from being thrown against the canyon wall and now watched the impossible scene with all four of his compound eyes. His warrior brain tried to process what he was seeing but kept rejecting the evidence. A creature 1/10 the size of the Shadow Maw was methodically dismantling the greatest predator in known space. Thok stood frozen with his warhammer hanging loose in his massive stone hands. He had seen strength before, had prided himself on being the strongest warrior of his people. But what the human was doing went beyond strength into something that had no name. The Gorith champion felt small and weak for the first time in his life. The Shadow Maw's roars had changed from rage to pain, to something that sounded almost like pleading. But Jinwoo was beyond mercy now. Something had awakened in him that was older than civilization, older than technology, older than the very concept of mercy. This was the concentrated violence of every human ancestor who had ever fought for survival. His hands worked with surgical precision, even as they tore through muscle and sinew. He found the creature's major blood vessels and severed them, found the nerve, clusters that controlled its movement, and destroyed them. The Shadow Maw was not just dying, it was being systematically taken apart by a predator that had finally found worthy prey. Blood covered Jinwoo from head to toe, turning his torn work clothes into crimson rags. But he did not stop, could not stop, would not stop until the thing that had dared to threaten him was reduced to scattered pieces. His breathing was steady and controlled, like he was performing routine maintenance on a piece of mining equipment. The alien hunters began to understand why humans had conquered their homeworld, despite having no natural weapons or armor. Despite being slower than most predators and weaker than most prey animals, they had somehow become the dominant species on a planet that was trying to kill them from the moment they first stood upright. Jinwoo found the creature's spine and began to work on it with the same methodical precision. The Shadow Maw's struggles became weaker and more sporadic as its nervous system was systematically destroyed. The beast that had killed for 200 years was helpless in the grip of something that evolution had designed to be the perfect killer. The end came suddenly and with surprising quiet. The Shadow Maw's final roar became a whimper, then a whisper, then silence. Jinwoo continued his work for several more minutes, making sure that every major system in the creature's body was completely destroyed. When he finally stopped, the canyon was filled with nothing but the sound of dripping blood. He stood slowly on top of what remained of the Shadow Maw, his chest heaving with exhaustion, but his eyes still burning with satisfied fury. The greatest predator in the galaxy had been reduced to scattered pieces by nothing more than human determination and the genetic memory of countless ancestors who had refused to become prey. The alien hunters knelt without being asked or ordered. Their weapons lay forgotten on the canyon floor as they stared up at the blood-soaked human who had just accomplished the impossible. They had witnessed the birth of a legend, and they knew that nothing would ever be the same. Slesh was the first to find his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. The Vorthak warrior had fought on 100 worlds against creatures that most beings could not imagine, but he had never seen anything like what had just happened. The human had not just killed the Shadow Maw, he had unmade. Idzik clicked his mandibles in a rhythm that was the Chitrak equivalent of a prayer. His people worshipped strength and skill in combat, but what he had just witnessed went beyond both into something that touched the very essence of what it meant to be a predator. The human had shown them all what true hunting looked like. Thok simply bowed his massive head in respect. The Gorath champion understood power, and he had just seen power in its purest form. The human had used nothing but his body and his will to destroy something that their most advanced weapons could barely scratch as rescue ships arrived to take them home. The alien hunters spoke in hushed tones about what they had witnessed. They would tell their leaders about the human who had torn apart the Shadow Maw. They would warn their fleets and their armies. They would make sure that every species in the galaxy understood one simple truth. Humans might look weak with their soft skin and lack of natural weapons, but they were the most dangerous predators in the universe. They had conquered their own world through nothing but determination, and they would conquer the galaxy the same way. Any species that underestimated them did so at their own peril. Jinwoo cleaned the blood from his hands and face as best he could, then picked up his plasma cutter from where he had left it. The tool felt familiar and comfortable in his grip, like an old friend. He looked up at the alien stars above this deadly world and smiled quietly to himself. He was no longer the frightened engineer who had crashed on Corvin Prime. He was something new, something that the galaxy had never seen before. He was a human who had remembered what his species was truly capable of. And as word of his deeds spread throughout the stars, the reputation of humanity would be forever changed. The greatest hunters in the galaxy had learned that they were not the apex predators they thought they were. There was something else out there, something that looked harmless, but carried the concentrated violence of an entire species' evolution. Something that would not hesitate to tear apart anything that threatened it. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same.